Hello, I'm Sarah Ansari. I'm Professor of South Asian History here at Royal Holloway. The partition of India is what we call the dividing of the subcontinent of South Asia in August 1947 at the same time that independence took place. It produced, instead of one single independent state, two separate states, India and Pakistan. And Pakistan was a very strangely shaped country in that it was made up of two wings, East and West Pakistan, separated by something like 1,500 miles of Indian territory. And East Pakistan today is Bangladesh. So partition was the division of British India into separate states. But what makes partition, I think, all the more important is how that division took place. It took place very hurriedly. In only 5 weeks were the new borders drawn up. So in that speed and uncertainty, what we see is millions of ordinary people uprooting themselves and travelling across the new borders to either India or Pakistan. So Hindus and Sikhs who found themselves living in what was becoming Pakistan, a state intended for Muslims, travelled to India, and Muslims in India travelled to Pakistan. Obviously not everyone moved. India continued to contain large numbers of Muslims. Muslims remained the second largest religious community in India after independence, and there were still non-Muslims who carried on living in Pakistan. But this refugee movement added up eventually to something like 15 million people. In other words, the largest migration that was seen anywhere in the world in the 20th century. And alongside the huge numbers of people who moved, and they travelled by foot, by ox cart, by train, the elite among them managed to fly across the new borders, but for most people it was a physical challenge to get themselves from their homes to their new homes. But alongside that, maybe as many as 1 million people died. We'll never know exactly how many. They died either because they were murdered by people from other religious communities, or they died thanks to the trials and tribulations of being a refugee in a refugee camp, living through what was a tough winter, so from disease and from malnutrition. Women were abducted, children got separated from their parents, and so this was a highly traumatic and unanticipated accompaniment to independence. Independence should have been all about celebrating the future, but what independence actually witnessed was an enormous trauma on the part of people, particularly in North India, crossing these new borders that had been decided upon just a matter of weeks before independence occurred. This enormous mass migration was largely spontaneous. It wasn't organised from above. It was really people, acting on their own initiatives, taking the decision to move from somewhere that in the short run or in the immediate seemed a dangerous place to be, to somewhere where they hoped that they would be safer. A lot of people apparently moved not expecting to stay permanently on the other side of what was going to be a new border, but they took this action to safeguard themselves and their families. Politicians from all parties, from all sides, and by that I mean I include the British as well, were taken enormously by surprise by this popular response. So it was certainly not something that was orchestrated in any way by the powers that be. The legacy of partition was not just two states, but also two states that have proved not to get along very well with each other ever since. So there's a legacy of suspicion and tension and bitterness, thanks to partition. India and Pakistan have fought some cold and hot wars ever since, often focused on or centred on Kashmir, a part of the subcontinent that ended up divided thanks to partition. So I would say that coming round to the 75th anniversary of partition, South Asia, the subcontinent and its people remain as divided as they were back in 1947. It's incredibly hard for an Indian to get a visa to visit Pakistan, and similarly for a Pakistani to visit India. So we still live with the aftershocks, the legacies of partition to this day. They haven't gone away.